We undervalue the power that the enemy has to stop our destiny, to stop us from becoming whole, to recognize that this is not just fear, this is not just doubt, this is a powerful force keeping me from trusting God. But power moves. So when I begin to live like Jesus is here, that he's with me, that he's cheering for me, that he loves me and he wants to see me reconnected to who God knew I could be in my mother's womb, I reclaim that power from the enemy. You may have had the power to keep me silent. That shame may have had the power to keep me from speaking up, but power moves. And I'm reclaiming my power so that I can begin to move in the direction of my purpose.
Listed as, I think Time magazine said, 100 of the next most influential people in the world, not just in America, in the world. And so I just wanted, Sarah Jakes, it is just great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to see you again. It's been so long.
It has. In fact, I was saying that at the very top of the show. I think it was maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing you speak and being so blown away by your vulnerability and your story. Parts of your story were hard, but you shared it in such a way. Sometimes people could share hard things and the audience almost feels like they need to take care of you. It was not wounds with you, it was scars.
Yeah.
And there's a difference.
Well, I'm so grateful that there was a space created where women could have those types of conversations. And I learned a long time ago, no matter how hard my story was, whenever I told it, there was always someone who seemingly had a more difficult story. And I learned that we're all carrying these heavy stories, and if one person is willing to just open the floodgates, then maybe we could clear out our channels and finally begin to make space for love and grace and the type of life that I think Jesus died for us to live.
That is beautifully said. Why do you think we found it so hard traditionally in the church, to be honest?
Oh, goodness.
Take as long as you need.
I was going to say to you, this, man, I think that we genuinely want to get it right. I think we do turn our lives over and we say like, hey, I want to live up to the reason why Jesus got on the cross. But then there's this reality that like I'm messing up every single day. And sometimes they're small mess ups, sometimes they're big mess ups. And I would rather not talk about it at all so that it looks like I maintain this covenant than to recognize that the covenant is an ongoing process and Jesus meets us where we are, not who we pretend to be. And so someone has to create space. And I think that if we don't see it modeled, it's difficult for us to step into it. And so the beauty of having leaders who are willing to be vulnerable, who are willing to say, I want to lead you to Jesus. I don't want to be Jesus. I don't want to be the judge or the juror over your life. I just want to create a space where you can connect with God. I think it makes it easier for people to say, well, hey, can I roll up my sleeves and show you where I'm still wounded? Can I show you this scar? Do you think Jesus would be okay with this? We have to create those spaces. And I don't think that the church has always done a good job of creating those spaces, but I do believe, I really do believe this, that was the intent. Yeah. But we're responsible for our actions, and so we got to make sure those align, and I think we're stepping into that.
I love the fact that you use the word covenant, because if you go way back to when God made that covenant with Abraham and put Abraham to sleep, and then, you know, so God was the only one who walked through the divided animals. And to me, what that says is, you know what, Abram? Chill, chill, have a nap, you're going to mess up. But God is the one who never fails and always keeps his word.
You know, and it breaks my heart because when I study scripture, there's literally nothing that suggests everyone did something perfectly, that everyone got it right, that life was going to be a cakewalk. Like everything that I read says hard, difficult, failure, challenges, but faithful, grace, opportunity after opportunity, community. And so I think maybe sometimes we highlight what we want it to say instead of what's actually there. And when we really grapple with what's actually there, I think it calls us higher, but it does definitely meet us where we are.
You know, it's so interesting. I said at the top of the show that I remember seeing you speak 8 years ago. And then a few months ago, I'm going through my kind of social media and I come across this thing that some of my friends were involved with. And it's a Women of Evolve tour. And I watch you walk out onto that. By the way, that outfit, hello. I mean, that was stunning.
If we're gonna do it, we should do it well. We should do all things well.
Yes, yes. But it was there was something on you, Sarah. There was a sense of God's presence and authority and leadership that, I mean, I found myself deeply moved just watching you. And it just made me want to ask, what's your path been like over the last few years?
I have been blown away. When I met you, I knew I had this story about how God can find even the most broken, the most insecure, the most damaged person and make them feel loved and valued, like they never strayed from the 100. And I just felt like everyone should know that. Yeah. And I was sharing my story, and I was sharing just how far off track I'd gotten. Some things within my control, some things outside of my control. I was sharing the residue of how it changed the way I saw myself, how it changed the way I saw others and God and love, and how those choices had their own punishments connected to them. And I felt like if all I ever told was my story, that would be enough. Then my husband, he wasn't my husband at the time, he was just a pastor in Los Angeles who had this thriving community, asked me if I would come and preach a message. And I was like, I'm not really a preacher, but I will come and share my story, and I'll share some scriptures that inspired me. And that moment was almost 10 years ago, and I would consider that one of the most pivotal moments in my life, because I began to realize that God could still use me to speak through me, even if I was borrowing stories from scripture or stories from other people's lives. And I just didn't realize that it would affect so many people. I was never trying to build a platform. I was never like trying to build a brand. Like I was simply saying yes. And I'm like, I'm gonna study, I'm gonna pray, I'm gonna throw everything that I have at it, and that's gonna be obedience. And over the last 8 years, these messages have really resonated with people in a way that I cannot control. Like I can't control it. And I just keep telling God, as long as you keep showing up in this space, I'll keep saying yes. But it's, you know, I wouldn't consider myself a natural speaker. It makes me nervous. I stumble over my words. I don't like thinking on the spot. And so there's a vulnerability connected to me speaking in those moments that forces me to be completely reliant upon God. And when I realize that God has shown up in the moment with me, I be searching for him. I'm like, God, please, are you here? Hello, are you coming?
Give me a sign.
And then there's this moment where I can just feel God's presence, and I can see the people in the room feel God's presence, and I can tell we are moving towards who God has called us to be, all of us collectively. And that gives me so much joy, so much energy that I feel like invincible. And I'm like, let's go. Who wants it? Like, it turns into something completely different. And then I just like go back into my little corner. I'm like, all right, God, we'll see what happens next time.
But that's what I felt when I watched it. It seemed different because I've been at conferences where there's a speaker on the platform and there's the audience, and it's very much the sense of we're listening to you speak and we're taking notes. It didn't feel like that with you. It felt like they were all leaning in and walking with you.
I love it.
And that felt different to me.
I cannot explain it, but what happens at Woman Evolve, there were 40,000 women, which I was nervous about. The conference that I had before then, we had 3,000 women, which I thought it was big. I was like, it was only 4 years old, and have 3,000 women at a conference. It's
amazing. Yeah.
I'm good. Like, I'm so satisfied with whatever God gives me. I never asked for more. And then we took 1 year down, we came back, and now we have 40,000 women. And I'm like, God, I don't want to be big for big's sake. Like, I still want your presence to be undeniable. I want there to be sisterhood and community and connection. And there were people who were leaving me comments, and they said it felt so intimate. 40,000 women.
See, that's special. That's amazing.
It's unexplainable to me, and so I feel like my job is to protect its purity, to make sure that even with all it, like, when things happen and they grow, people are like, hey, can I come? Can I do this? Hey, can I partner with it? And I've had to say no to some things that, like, the little girl me would be like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. This person wants to partner with me. But I cannot let contamination affect whatever this is God is doing. For someone to be in a room with 40,000 women and to say it felt intimate, that God's presence was that thick, his love was so overflowing with these women that it felt intimate. I don't want to lose that. And I think it has to do with the fact, one, people tell me I'm like their best friend in their head. And I do think that it's like, if my friend invited me somewhere and you're her friend, then we must all be friends. So I think there is that commonality in the connection, but then there's just the hunger and the thirst that ties us together too.
But I love the fact that you're protecting what God is doing. Because I remember maybe halfway through the years of Women of Faith, someone asked if they could have lunch with me, and she was quite a well-known speaker. And I was like, yeah, this will be fun. And she said, I think I should be on your platform because I'm actually a better speaker than some of the women you have.
Okay.
And I remember saying to her, you know what? A, you're absolutely right, and B, it's irrelevant. Because we knew this small group of women, we were not the best.
Yeah.
We were just the people that God said, okay, do you want to do this? And we were like, yes, Lord, we're all in.
Yeah.
And I said to her, this is something that God is doing. It's not just like we're trying to get a big conference going.
Right.
I mean, who has the time for that?
Yeah.
Who has the energy for that?
Yeah.
But what I could tell, because several of my friends, I was out of town, so I couldn't go, but several of my friends went to the conference. And I remember calling one of them afterwards, and I said, okay, tell me everything. She said, Sheila, I don't have words. I don't have words. All I can tell you is I went and I experienced the presence of the Lord, and something inside of me has shifted. And I thought, Lord, that's what being in your presence does.
Yes.
You could be in our presence, you know, you might enjoy it for a bit, but when you're in his presence, something shifts.
That gives me chills, because there is nothing more that I want or that I needed than a safe space where I could come in whatever shape I was in, and just God's presence meet me. And maybe a woman pat me on the back and say, hey, you're not in it by yourself. We're intentional about that at Woman Evolve. So I'm an introvert.
Me too.
Okay, so I've created this huge movement, and I always tell the introverts, I'm like, things about to get real awkward in here. Because I'm going to make you turn to the woman beside you. Now is not the time to grab your phone. You don't have to go to the bathroom, no excuses. And look at that woman and hold her hand and be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Wow.
And allow her to feel connected to you. And it gives me chills that through that connection, that people, we're changed. To feel less alone in our shame and our pain and our hopes and our dreams, for someone else to say, I mean, it's Mary and Elizabeth, to say, I'm on a journey too. It's a little bit different. There's a few different nuances, but I'm on this journey too. You're not in it on your own. That's enough to help you survive without God just performing all kinds of miracles, to know that someone else is going to walk it out with me. Sometimes that's all the miracle you need.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, I'm here with Sarah Jakes Roberts, who has this incredible new book out. It's called Power Moves. If you have friends that you think, you know what, my girlfriends are really struggling right now, text them, tell them to join us, tell them to join this conversation, because this is about what Jesus is doing in his daughters. I love the title, Power Moves. And at first, it reads differently.
It does.
Than I thought.
Yeah.
So I'm like, power moves. Okay, this is going to be 10 things I can do to be more powerful. And I'm thinking, I think I'm too tired, Lord.
I know. Oh my gosh. When I tell you, I realized that when I first announced the book, you know, it's interesting to see how different messaging resonates with people. And, you know, you post the trailer, you post the book thing, and it's all like fancy and stuff. But when I actually gave language to, like, girl, I'm not about to give you something else to do. I'm going to help you see that power literally moves. Because so often we're longing for past that we can't access, standing in a future that doesn't always make sense, having to let go of identities that once meant a lot to us, or moving into something God's called us to that we aren't exactly sure we'll have the confidence to step into. But to see that power moves, like it moves. And I don't think there's any better explanation of the way power moves than parenting. Because we see what makes me powerful as a parent to a newborn does not work for my 14-year-old. I can't pick her up on my lap and rock her anymore. I've got to listen, I've got to lean in, and giving ourselves permission to not be restricted to one definition of what power looks like. Maybe I don't always have to be the strong friend. Maybe I don't always have the answers. Maybe power for me in this moment looks like resting. And I am okay with power moving. And if we don't give ourselves permission to do that, culture will have us working and hustling and pretending until we don't know who we are anymore. And we'll be in a world where we feel powerless, not able to access the very power that God gave us to create change in the world. And I think that when we realize power moves, then we make power moves and we become a force.
Yeah, that's great. I remember Mary Graham, who's a dear friend of both of ours,
Yeah.
said to me, Sheila, no is a complete sentence. That was revolutionary for me because I grew up with this kind of understanding. If I wanted to please the Lord, I just said yes to everybody.
Yeah,
I said
yeah.
yes to every opportunity because every opportunity meant another opportunity to talk about Jesus. But I've discovered the importance of at times saying no,
Yeah.
so that when you do say yes, you bring your whole self
You
to the
bring
yes.
your whole self. Man,
Has that been hard for you?
yes, it has been hard for me. I think especially as whatever God's done in my life began to like grow, and you get a lot of people who are like, come here, come do this, come do that, come this. And I didn't feel like I had capacity. And I remember I was actually supposed to be at Propel Women with Christine Kane. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and my flight was like at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I could not get out of bed. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Oh, no, I hear you.
Do you
Trust me,
understand?
I totally understand.
I couldn't
Yeah.
do it. I could not be the person they expected me to be when I got there.
Yeah.
I could only be who I was in that moment.
Yeah.
And I called Chris, and Chris is so amazing. I love her. I need to text her after this and just tell her thank you for being who you are.
Yeah.
And she was like, girl, take care of yourself. Absolutely not.
I love that.
Take care of yourself. And that gave me permission in that moment to realize that, like, if I do not stop, I was younger at the time. I'm 35 now, but I was younger at the time, and I was burnt out. But I was also just getting started.
Yeah.
And I realized that if I do not pace myself, I'm not going to have anything to give. And I think a lot of times when we see leaders who are caught up in scandals or who are caught up in some addiction, and we're like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? The person who was feeding me needed to be fed themselves. It's because they were so busy feeding you that they didn't take time to have their own prayer and conviction and transformation on a personal level with God. And I don't ever want to be a figure.
Yeah.
I always want to be seen as a person, which means I have to see myself as a person. I can't drink my own Kool-Aid. It's nice when they're like New York Times best-selling author and packing that, like, that sounds good, but like, girl, you're raggedy. Like, girl, God is working on you every single day. Like, God is not impressed. This is a part of God's plan. If you don't get your life together, he will get someone else to do it. You got to make yourself worthy of this grace and anointing by being honest about who you are, where you are, what you need, and consulting God about all that you do.
But honestly, Sarah, I think that's amazing that you had the courage to say, I can't do this. Because you say you're 35, you're a baby. You're just
I know,
a
right?
baby. But you
telling me that.
You've just garnered so much wisdom through your years, though. How much of that do you think is because you had some very hard lessons to learn in the beginning?
It's the only reason.
Yeah.
It's the only reason. Sometimes, I'm 35, and so people are like, are you guys finished having children? And I was like, whatever the Lord says, but don't say that.
La, la, la.
Do not say that. But I've been a mom my whole life. I had my son at 14 years old.
Yeah.
I've been a mom my whole life. And I wanted to be a good mom at 14. And I had a lot of emotional development to do, and spiritual development, and mental development, and I was a baby when I had a baby. But I wanted to be a good mom, and so I leaned into what I thought a good mom should look like, what type of household I should provide for him, what type of schedule he needed. And so you talk about the enemy meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. God meant this. He turned this thing, changed it into something that allowed me to be grounded in so much wisdom and experience that now at 35, I think sometimes I do sound like, maybe someone who's a little bit further down the road, but the road started pretty early for me.
You talk in your book, the book is called Power Moves. It's a fabulous book. If don't be even in the slightest bit intimidated thinking, I don't think I'm a powerful person, this book will shift your perspective of what that really is. But you talk about places in your journey where you feel as if you lost power.
Yeah.
What are some of those places?
Oh, goodness. In my marriage, so I was living in Dallas, met the man of my dreams. I moved to California, and I think that there's a certain level of security you achieve as a single person.
Yes.
And you're maybe confident, maybe you're finally at a place where you think, you know, I don't need a relationship to define me. I can find joy outside of partnership. And that's where I was. I was a single mother at the time, and I was like, okay, I got this. And then I got married, and other areas of growth and development
Funny how that happens.
were revealed. I was like, excuse me, I'm not perfect. And I found that I was being the kind of wife that I thought I should be for him. So I was making dinner. I was, you know, going along with his ideas, even if sometimes I didn't necessarily agree. I wasn't contributing my thoughts to our marriage and the direction of our lives. And I'm like, this is what marriage is supposed to be. And eventually I felt powerless, that my voice didn't matter, that it didn't have any space. And it's not because he didn't invite it, it's because there was this expectation that I subscribed to without even consulting him that put more pressure on me than necessary. You're so right that so many people aren't walking around saying, you know what, I want to be powerful. But when I say how many people have felt powerless.
Oh gosh, there's hands going up all across America.
Everyone in the room. So I don't necessarily want to be powerful because I think we're afraid of arrogance. We're afraid of coming off as prideful, the intellect, the demand that comes with being powerful. But I don't want to feel powerless. And I think Power Moves is this in-between of discovering what does power look like in my context. And so I had to stop and ask myself, am I being a powerful version of society's wife, or am I being a powerful version of Tere's wife? And in order to be a powerful version of Tere's wife, I got to talk to him about what's important. And he did not care whether or not I cooked dinner. He's in LA. They go out to eat all the time. I'm a girl from the South. I'm like, dinner's got to be on the table by 6 o'clock. We need a starch. We need a vegetable. We need a protein. He didn't care about that. And I'm killing myself trying to create this environment that he didn't even need. And our marriage became so much more richer when I said, this is the kind of wife that I can be. It may not be what's expected of other people, but this is who I can be. And he's like, I love that version of you. Let's do that. And I do think this generation is defining relationships on their own terms, working on their own terms, because we are at a space where they're like, I have to figure out what does this look like for me and not as a collective society. And there's something very liberating. Yeah.
When I was watching parts of your conference, the thing that seemed clear to me was this wasn't just a great conference. It felt like a wave. It felt like a wave of something fresh that God was doing. And it kind of gave me chills because I love, love, love. One of my favorite things in the world is to see God use sisters, you know, to see what God's doing. I mean, I have a friend at the moment who's in Cambodia and God is doing stupid things through her. I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's how I felt when I watched it, because I thought, God, this is amazing. You know, this person who had so many reasons to say, you're not good and you're not kind, is now in an arena full of women, helping them understand, yes, you are good and you are kind. What do you sense God is doing? And particularly, what do you want women to get from this book?
Oh, that's such a layered question.
I know it. I'm just thinking that's like 4 questions wrapped in one.
I think that God is deconstructing systems that have contained his glory instead of spreading it.
So good.
I think part of that dismantling is authenticity and vulnerability. I think that that is power moving within itself. I have to tell you, sometimes it's really hard for me to talk about the book because we start with feeling powerless, and then how do we come to a place where we begin to ask ourselves the questions that allow us to define power for ourselves? How do we introduce it into the world? And then how do we allow that power to change the world?
Right.
And so I believe that part of what God is doing in the earth with this dismantling, with this need for glory to spread and not be relegated to just one expression, is empowering individuals to show up in the fullness of who they are so that they can reach who's around them. And so for me, it just so happens to be that, you know, I guess this grace God has given me reaches a few thousand, maybe millions. But that is no more important than the person who's got the babies at home, or the person who is just helping students make it through their classes. all of us are responsible for the influence God has given us. And until we allow that influence to really take up space in us, then it can't overflow and change other people. But I do think now more than ever, we need people who are willing to be honest about who God is, honest about how he changes their life. All we need are witnesses.
Yeah.
You don't have to be prolific preachers. You don't have to be, you don't need a platform. You don't need a brand. It doesn't take all of this.
Right.
All you need is to be a witness. And if you can be a witness to whoever's willing to listen, then your job is done.
Yeah.
And tell as many people as you can.
And I think all it takes to dispel darkness is one person lighting a match, a candle. It's like there really is no darkness. It's just an absence of light. I heard somebody say that recently. And when we all do that, the thing that I found interesting when I got to the end of your book is there's zero self-indulgence in this book. It's not about you at all. I mean, your story and your heart, I get as much of your heart as I do of your mind. There's such a lot about your heart in this book. But it's all about others. It's all about reaching out. And I love the fact that you talk about that passage in Matthew 25 where it's the parable of talents. It's very significant. It's right before Christ is about to face his betrayal and execution and rising from the dead. And he tells the story of these parables. And you mentioned the fact that the one person who was given just one talent does nothing. And you say the root of that is fear.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that, Sarah.
Oh, man, when you are not sure that what you have is enough, you don't throw it in the direction of anything because you're afraid of hearing it wasn't enough.
Right.
I think that the criticism that hurts us the most is the criticism that echoes an insecurity that already existed inside of us. And so in an effort to protect ourselves from being further wounded, we don't take chances. We don't step out on faith. We don't obey when God says move because we are afraid. And so we're protecting this one thing. And what we realize is that God is a protector. I'm stumbling because I was just preaching about, oh my gosh, I just preached this message yesterday.
Take your time. We're not going anywhere.
I preached yesterday about hazardous conditions. And I talked about how in Luke 10, when Jesus dispatches the 70 disciples and they come back and they're like, do you understand what you gave us? Even the demons are subject to us in your name. And I think that they were so blown away because they thought when he gave them this message to go out and to spread your peace and prepare the way and to heal the sick and to establish the kingdom of heaven, that was all that he gave them to do. I think they were blown away because they didn't realize that the demons were going to be subject to them too. Like, God, what is this thing that you've given me? That one thing turned out to be many other things. And I think the person who was hanging on to that one thing, maybe not thinking it's good enough, maybe thinking it can serve no value, that they have to understand that that one thing has multiplication assigned to it. And if I could just make it a little bit more practical, because, you know, as someone who didn't really think that they were gifted or had anything that the world could offer, what I didn't realize is that, like, my one thing was just saying yes to living right for God.
Wow.
Like, I can't sing. I didn't think writing was a gift. I guess I'm a speaker. I didn't think that I was like a talented speaker. It's not like I've been waiting for this moment where I could unleash my talent into the world and being not like I had never lived like that. My one thing was, I think I can do better than this.
Wow.
That was my one thing.
But that's huge.
It's huge. And if people can realize, everything is, you know, there's a lots of glitzy, glammy things happening on social media that makes you think that, like, I need to write a book, I need to write music, I need to do something that feels like a big thing. But if all you can say is, I can do better than this, that one thing, God will take care of the rest. God will take care of the rest. I want to live like Jesus is real and I can be transformed into his image. And today I'm going to make a choice that reflects that belief. That one thing, it changes everything.
I love that phrase, that one thing has multiplication assigned to it. Because I think that we almost wait for it to be multiplied before we use it.
Right.
You know? Because I remember when I was invited to speak for the first time at Women of Faith, they called me and I'm like, no, I don't speak. I'm not a speaker. And the thought of speaking to women terrified me because I've always thought women can be mean. And they said, well, you know, we feel you're supposed to be part of the team. Would you at least come and meet the other women? And I was like, well, okay. And I remember sitting down and one of them saying, you know, I'm agoraphobic, didn't leave my home for 10 years. I buried my daughter when she was 18 days old. And I thought, well, actually, I could fit in here.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that was clear was that Jesus was the hero of every story.
Yeah.
Because I thought, if I have to stand up there and be like Wonder Woman for Jesus, we're all in trouble. But when Christ is the hero of the story, it's a story that is well worth telling.
It's such a shame that when I'm preaching that I act like Wonder Woman, because that too is my belief. I don't know, something does happen when I get up there where I look like Wonder Woman. But I get excited about people getting it, but that's totally my story too. And if he does not breathe on the message, I have nothing.
Yeah.
So when I catch that breath, I definitely feel like I have on a cape. But
I love watching you like that because it's so obvious. There's never an air with you of, look what I've got. It's like you're so genuinely excited about what you understand about the goodness of God that you want everybody else to catch the aroma of that.
I do, yeah. He causes us to triumph, and then we get to be that fragrance.
Well, one of the things I do that has really helped me, because I still don't, I mean, I go out and speak, but I still don't feel like that I'm naturally. Because I've worked with people who are just natural storytellers, and you could hear them 20 times and it's still fascinating. I'm not like that. So what I do before I got on the platform, I have this internal thing where I'll say, like, after you, Lord. And I have this conscious thing of, okay, we're going up there together. Okay. And then I know, it's like I'm under-catered one more time, just fish and loaves, big crowd, not enough. But I think that's when God loves to show up.
I'm going to steal that. One thing I do before I'll read my text or my scripture, and then I'll pray. And almost every single time, I'm like, no fear, no nerves, no anxiety. I think that when I pray in that moment, that I'm supposed to be like praying for the people in the room. I'm praying for myself. I'm like, God, please. And then there's the other part of me, Lord, I'm like, God, if this is going to be how you end it, because you want me to be up here stumbling, bumbling, and failing, like, just make that clear, because I'll never do it again. But if I'm supposed to be up here, give me peace, give me your pace, give me your power, and I will go wherever you want me to go. I'll say whatever you want me to say, as long as you don't leave me up here by myself. And the moment he stopped showing up,
we're all going home.
We gotta go. I do not want to be making stuff up.
But I think that's the most freeing, liberating thing. Because I mean, somebody wrote in my school annual, least likely to do anything. And she was a friend of mine. And it was because my father had died by suicide when I was little, and I was just terrified. I grew up just so full of fear. Couldn't travel for more than 3 miles in a car without throwing up. Now I've got 4 million miles in American Airlines. But I think when you put your not enoughness into the hands of our God who's more than enough, that's when miracles happen.
It really does. I mean, his strength is made perfect in our weakness. And I am a living testimony, and I will never become so whatever that I forget to tell people how little he's working with. Like, when he got me, he didn't get a whole lot to, and I'm okay with that. Compared to how much he's giving, I gave him a lot of little. I gave him a lot of little in return. And anything that you see that looks big and amazing and powerful that comes out of my life is partnership. It's not me.
If you're just tuning in, you've picked a good time to tune in. We're talking with Sarah Jakes Roberts. So this great new book is called Power Moves. And you'll start one place thinking, I think I know where she's going. And you'll end up in such a different, such a freeing, such a liberating. I think you'll be a different person by the time that you finish the book. I love that at the end of one of the chapters, you have all these I believe statements. Why did you include that?
You have to speak it. The power of life and death is in the tongue. And sometimes what I hear almost more than anything is people telling me, you gave me the words that I didn't know I needed to say.
Wow.
Like when you were speaking, it gave me language. I was feeling something, I was going through something. I didn't understand it until I heard your message, until I read your post. And so I thought it would be appropriate to give people language. And so we talk about, like, maybe you have a fear of speaking up for yourself. And one of the statements would be something like, I believe that speaking up is more powerful than internalizing doubt. You know, like to say, like, I believe, I am shifting my belief. You want to talk about power moving? This is the part, like, I really hope this book, like, I hope people get it and they hang on to it. Because when we talk about power moves, we're not just talking about power moving in the way that you show up in the world. Who you are as Sheila Walsh, as an interviewer right now, may be different than who you are as a mother, right? Like, my power is moving as I'm moving.
I have less makeup on then.
Girl, when I leave here, you'd be amazed. The power is constantly moving depending on who I am and how I'm showing up in the world. And that is something that we certainly cover. But what I wanted to make clear foundationally, when we go back to that scripture in Luke 10, when the disciples came back and they said, no, Jesus tells them, you know, I saw Satan fall from the sky like lightning. He said, I gave you power over serpents and scorpions and over all of the power of the enemy. That word dunamis that we see in the New Testament shows up when Jesus says the power over the enemy. And I think where a lot of us get misaligned is that we undervalue the power that the enemy has to stop our destiny, to stop us from becoming whole, to recognize that this is not just fear, this is not just doubt, this is a powerful force keeping me from trusting God. This is a force that is powerful enough to keep me from raising this family, from seeking wholeness, from getting healed, from getting sober. This is power too, but power moves. So when I begin to live like Jesus is here, that he's with me, that he's cheering for me, that he loves me and he wants to see me reconnected to who God knew I could be in my mother's womb, I reclaim that power from the enemy. You may have had the power to keep me silent. That shame may have had the power to keep me from speaking up. That people-pleasing may have had the power to keep me from taking up space in my own world, but power moves. And so it is just as much about power moving as it is about reclaiming power that was stolen from us, that was robbed and taken away by trauma and different villains that have come in and out of our lives, and saying, you know what? Power moves, and I'm reclaiming my power so that I can begin to move in the direction of my purpose.
Do you ever find yourself in a situation, or like I remember I had been speaking for several years, and then I found myself back in a place where a lot of hard things had happened in my life. It was actually back at the 700 Club, back at CBN. And I found like all these old negative things of things I believed about myself back then, just kind of deciding to just jump up again. Do you ever have to deal with stuff from the past or people from your past, or how does power move there?
Oh, child. Okay, so listen. You know, I was living in I met my husband. I moved to Los Angeles. We lived there for 8 years. It seems like we're going to build our life out there and everything's just going to be settled. And I'm TD Jakes' daughter, and that is how most people have introduced me. Questions people want to know is, what is it like to be TD Jakes' daughter? And so I think living in Los Angeles really created a sense of individuality. I think even in the way that I speak, that I didn't feel the pressure to be like TD Jakes' daughter when speaking. I could just be Sarah Jakes Roberts for this community in Los Angeles, and they would get me, and this is the space where I will feel fulfilled. In God's wisdom, he's brought us back to Dallas to be a part of the leadership team of the Potter's House Dallas. And all of a sudden, I feel like the 8-year-old girl who moved from West Virginia back to Dallas, lost in a world that was maybe bigger than me, maybe that I didn't really fit into. My daughter was 14 at the time that we moved. She was actually 13, turning 14. I got pregnant at 13. And turned 14 when I had my son. And all of that came crashing down at the same time. Am I built for whatever leadership looks like in Dallas? Can I raise my children in a world where I felt like I got lost? If I create these boundaries, is it going to damage their relationship with my parents? So I've got all of these doubts swarming there. I'm like, well, if you didn't do this at all, you wouldn't have anything to worry about. I would say for someone who's experiencing that, to stay in the tension. To stay in the tension of figuring out why this is coming to the surface. There was a message I preached that was called Glory Triggers. And because, you know, I'm a huge mental health advocate, and we hear a lot about trauma and triggers. But I preach glory triggers because I wanted people to understand that God's got triggers too. And there are some things that happen in your life where it feels like something negative is coming to the surface. But if you stay in the tension, you will see how God's glory is connected to that thing that was maybe once painful. And I stayed in the tension. And what I learned in staying in the tension is that God did not call me into a space that would require me to change what I know about him, that would require me to change what I know he has highlighted as important for me. It is important to me that my children feel connected to me no matter where I am. It is important to me that this ministry that God's given me, it was built on authenticity and vulnerability. God's not going to call me into something that's going to change what he told me my assignment was. And so this tension was convincing me that I would need to change, modify, conform. But if I could stay rooted, if I could stay anchored in what God said to me, this wave was going to pass. And I'll tell you this, and then I will be quiet.
Oh, no, keep going.
So I'm in this tension. The negative thoughts are swarming, but I'm staying in the tension. I'm still saying yes. I'm going to be in Dallas, but I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm going to be my authentic self, and they're going to like it or they're going to send me back to Los Angeles.
Good with either.
I'm going to say yeah, right. I'm going to be good with either. I'm going to say yes when I can say yes. I'm going to say no when we have volleyball practice. I'm going to keep the main thing, and we're going to see what happens. And so I was having a Sunday. My father was going to be out of town. My husband was going to be out of town. I don't even think my mother was there, which these are all my comfort support system, because I'm like, if I fail, I'll toss the mic to them. I'll go to the back. Nobody's there. It's all on me. And I'm preaching this message, and I'm preaching this message. The message is called Lock In. Sheila, I'm preaching the message. I'm doing so good. It's Sunday. I'm doing so good. My notes made since when I woke up. You know, I've got to do offering. I'm doing the words, like the announcements. I'm doing so good, girl. I look, and there's this woman in the crowd, and, you know, people are standing, and I'm speaking, and I'm hitting some points. Yeah. I'm like, oh, we're doing good. And I see her do this gesture, and I was like, I've never seen worship look like that before, but go for it. Then I go to the other side. I see this other woman do this gesture. Sheila, my wig is sliding off of my head. Sheila, my wig.
That's not a glory trigger.
That is not a glory trigger. So, you know, I try to give her a little tug. I try to put her back in alignment. She's rebellious, okay? She's a backslider. God. There's no one to toss the mic to. So I took it off.
You took it off? Okay, I have a whole new respect.
Sheila,
next level.
Sheila, I took it off. I took it off. I threw it to my sister, and I kept preaching. And I was like, this is a disaster. This is a disaster. I take my wig off, I throw it to my sister, and then after that service, I'm like, okay, well, we're going back to the West Coast. West Coast, best coast. Who cares? Who cares about the South? So many people said that when you took your wig off, it felt like you pulled shame out of my body. Like, it felt like I had permission to be myself. And I think it was God showing me. And it went viral. Sherry Shepherd does a thing on it. I'm like, and then I'm like humiliated in this church where I grew up, where I experienced humiliation. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. There were so many positive responses to women being like, I finally feel free to be myself. Like, I don't have to show up perfect all of the time. I can do this one day. I can do something else the next day. I feel like God can use me no matter what condition I am in. And I'm like, only God would take the foolish things of the world. Yeah. My wig, I study for hours. And the most powerful thing about my message was me taking my wig off. God told me in that moment, though, I want you just as you are. You don't have to change. I'll use it. And it may not look like what's been seen before. It may not be as polished. It may not feel as rigid as some of the things that have been effective in the past. But it will be you, and I will show up, and I will use it all. And so here I am.
Don't you think there was something prophetic about that moment? There's something about that I think God uses. I mean, if you think about some of the things that the Old Testament prophets did, you were like, no, dude, back off the caffeine.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that there was something about that just, it spoke a greater truth sometimes than our words ever could. That you get to come as you are, not as you wish you were. That's one of my main life messages is, I remember when Christian was little and he would travel with us and we'd had a birthday party backstage for the crew, and it was a chocolate cake, and Christian was covered in chocolate. And my mother-in-law was taking him back to the hotel to have a bath. And I was about to be introduced to go on stage, and I hear this little voice behind me saying, "Mommy!" And he just wanted one more hug.
Yeah.
And I knelt down, and I knew what was going to happen. I knew I was going to get frosting all over the suit. It's cream. I've never worn it since. In my hair. And it's one of the reasons I like working with women. They get the frosting in the hair thing.
Yeah.
But it was really intentional because I wanted them to see you don't clean yourself up to come to your mom because you don't clean yourself up to come to your father. And I think what happened in that moment, Sarah, what you did for people was to show what that looks like. You could have told them that for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It would not have been as powerful as what you physically did, as liberating as, I mean, God's doing something through your life. And honestly, that's why I want you to get this. This book, it's called Power Moves. And it's different than anything you've read before. You know, sometimes you think, well, I've kind of read everything that's out there. This is not, 10 things to be more like Jesus or 52 ways to cook chicken for the Lord. This is a different kind of book. I love the emphasis you have on community, on us needing one another. Like if you have this vision inside of you and you're not quite sure to do, find somebody else, find somebody who you could partner with. Has that been important for you?
For sure. I mean, it's why I know you. I mean, I was telling my story and I was telling it through a blog and then through partnership and me being able to come on the Women of Faith tour. I got to speak in some spaces that I had never been in before, to connect with women who were much further down the road in ministry than I was. And let me tell you, part of doing Women of Faith is part of the reason why I believe I became confident as a speaker. Growing up as a Black girl in church, like most of the women preachers that I had seen at the time were like so forceful in their delivery in a beautiful way.
Yeah,
I mean, but with power. And I was, all I had was this story. And I was like, I don't know if I could ever show up with that much force. I don't know if I could ever show up with that much passion. And when I did Women of Faith, I saw passion with a different expression. I saw that power moves, right? And so when I was doing it, I was like, if I can do it like that, then I could do it. And then I was able to exercise that muscle. And so through partnership, we see the different ways that power shows up. We are allowed to see other people's power, highlight our power, or help us to polish areas of ourselves where maybe we didn't think we had power. And so community is everything. Even though we are the most connected generation with social media and the internet, we're also the most isolated. Yeah. And we are very rarely getting outside of liking and commenting to connect and then flourish. And so I try to encourage that, but I try, because I'm an introvert, I try to remove all of the barriers. Like if you could just do it with, follow someone different. If you could just connect with someone on the comments, go to a meet and greet, to take baby steps, because I know it can be overwhelming to get out of our comfort zones.
Yeah. One of the things that you talk about in the book too is you talk about shame, and I don't know what shame means to you, perhaps. I always define it a little bit like this for myself, that guilt tells me I've done something wrong and shame tells me I am something wrong. A lot of the women that I speak to deal with shame. It's something that I think as a daughter of the King, we shouldn't wear. I mean, David said in Psalm, those who look to him for help will be radiant with joy, no shadow of shame will touch their faces. Do you ever feel those old voices coming back? And what do you do if you feel that kind of, oh, who are you kidding?
I think the wig thing was a thing, for real.
That would be a life-altering moment.
In the moment, I was like, whatever. Like, whatever. That's generally my energy when I'm speaking. I'm like, whatever, let's go. I'm for it. And then when, the glory lifted a little bit.
Yes, the cloud cleared.
I was like, excuse me, God? Why did you allow that to happen to me? Primarily because I felt so embarrassed. Like, when I was out of it, I was like, this is so embarrassing. And I felt ashamed. I'm like, you've made a mockery of the pulpit, Sheila, girl. I looked down at the altar during the altar call and another lady had taken her wig off. I was like, we got wigs on the altar.
You started a movement.
It's
not pretty.
And I take so much care with that platform. I don't take it lightly. And to think that someone would maybe think that I made a mockery of it, because a lot of people were like, you did it on purpose, or this was like a thing. I was like, who? I don't even do illustrated sermons. Do you think I would go from no illustrated sermons to taking my wig off? Are there no steps? But I felt a lot of shame. And I'm like, see, this is why girls like you don't need to do stuff like this, because you can't keep it on the level. And I recognize where the voice is coming from, though. And I think that shame does still arise, but when you know the source of the shame is coming from the outside, then you start to patch up the inside. And so I'm like, you need to get off of social media. You need to stop thinking so much about yourself in this moment and really trust God's plan. And so it's easier to hit ignore when you know where the call is coming from. But it takes some time to do that.
Yeah. I remember the church I was growing up in, there was a lady who was always, like if you needed anything, you could call her and she'd bring food, she'd do anything. But I only discovered later how much internal trouble she was in herself. And I remember talking to her about it and she said, well, I want to serve the Lord. And she felt taking care of herself was almost ungodly or unholy. You kind of address that in the book, that if you want to be available, it's like what you talk about in your marriage. When you bring the whole of who you are into that, it's better for everybody.
Yeah.
How do we address that in women, that it's good to take care of yourself? That's okay.
You know, I think that we have to dismantle philosophies that make us believe that it is our responsibility to be the savior in our household. And when you are the person that people come up to when they have boo-boos or when a friend is in crisis, they know that they can call you. It moves you from being a person to a savior. And if we're honest, we often even allow our ego to feel a little bit good that, like, I showed up for them. They know I can take care of them. They came to me. And so when you're building an identity that is not congruent with your reality, you can get trapped in between the two. And so you choose to keep showing up for people instead of sitting in the fullness of who you are. What I say to women is that if you're going to continue to serve everyone and you're going to make sure you fulfill everyone else's needs, the least you can do is ask yourself, well, what do I need?
Wow.
What do I need? Because if you're willing to run yourself empty because you recognize that a need needs to be fulfilled and you're the one who's going to do it, you have to ask yourself, how am I allowing others to fulfill my needs? Because needs are important. That's why you're doing everything.
Yeah.
What are your needs? Can you give them language? Even if you're like, well, no one can do anything about it, but can you give it language?
Yeah.
Can you put it in the atmosphere? Can you acknowledge that you are not just here as a machine, that you are a person? And then when someone asks you, do you need something? The answer is more readily available on your lips because you've taken the time to acknowledge that I am a need filler and I am a need needer.
Very well said.
And it's easier to ask for help when you know what you need, but when you don't know what you need because you never acknowledge that you have them, then you can't take advantage of the resources that God puts in your life.
I know without a shadow of a doubt that you have loved this program. It's one of the things I have loved about Sarah since the moment I met her is her honesty and her sense of humor and her humility and her strength. And I think of those of you who are watching who think, I so wish I could be like that. And it's one of the reasons I highly recommend this book. I mean, I get to read a lot of books. This book makes a difference. So I highly recommend that, that you would get a copy for yourself, maybe get one for a friend, somebody you think might be struggling. But I just want you to know right now how much you are seen and loved and valued by God. It's so easy to look at all the social media things and think, I wonder why I wasn't invited to that, or I wonder what's wrong with me, and I'll never be this, or I'll never be that. I think when you begin to understand the value that Christ has placed on your life, when we were getting ready to sell our house, I asked our realtor, how do we know how to price it? And he said, well, it'll sell for what anybody thinks it's worth. What Christ thought you were worth was his very own life. And just remember here at TBN that we care about you. We're not just out to just yakety yak and sell books. We're out to bring things that we believe will make a significant difference in your life. And the great thing is, when you come to God as you really are, when you tell him the whole truth, because let's face it, he's seen your movie. He knows everything. He knows everything and has chosen to love you right now, that then you're able to let his love fill that grace space in your life. And then you become that light on a hill. You become that someone who just brings the fragrance of Christ wherever you go. Sarah, I want to thank you just for being you, just for showing up. There's something just so delightful about you.
Thank you.
And thank you for this book.
Oh, thank you. It is my offering to the world. And, I wrote it because a lot of people were telling me, oh my gosh, you're such a powerhouse. You're so powerful when you preach. But I didn't really feel powerful when I preached. I felt powerful when I was at home. I felt powerful when I was walking around, loving on my husband and scratching my head. And I think that we need permission to experience power in a multitude of ways. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share what God's given me.
So if there was one thing, if people could only take away one thing from your book, what would you want that to be?
never stop searching for the power that is present in this moment. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how dark that grief is or that heartbreak is, never stop looking for the power that can lift you out of your despair, that can lift you out of your shame. It is present, and power is present in every single moment. But you have to be sensitive to look forward, and you have to trust that it's there.
Beautiful words from a beautiful woman. Remember, from all of us here, from Matt, Laurie, the whole crew, we love you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.